Namaste and welcome to OM Dharma YouTube channel. This is the second video of the Bhagavad Gita series. If you haven't watched the first video, please watch it. The link is in the description box. We've given a beautiful explanation of the teachings we can learn from the first two chapters of the Bhagavad Gita in that video. Just to give you a small recap, we saw that Sri Krishna points out the error in Arjun's thinking when Arjun's personality was shaken by grief and delusion towards his relatives and teachers. Next, Lord Krishna advises Arjun to correct the error by learning the knowledge of the Atma. And then he describes the means to attain the Atma. Finally, he also describes the characteristics of the individual who has realized the Atma. In this video, we are going to learn the teachings from chapter 3. So let's get started. Chapter 3 opens with Arjun's question, and he asks in 3.1 and 3.2, if knowledge is superior to action, in your opinion, why do you want me to perform this horrible action, O Keshav? You are confusing my intellect with these mixed up statements. Therefore, be certain and tell me that one statement by which I will attain the highest good. In the last chapter, Sri Krishna introduced the topic of Karma Yoga, where one performs selfless action, but later he spoke about the knowledge of the Atma. Arjun interpreted this as a statement that knowledge is superior to wisdom and wanted to clarify whether it was so. Arjun also referred to his fighting in the war as a horrible action. This word speaks a lot about his mental state. Sri Krishna had taught him that one should maintain equanimity in pleasant and unpleasant situations, but Arjun had not internalized and assimilated the teachings. Being a military man, one who is trained in issuing and receiving only orders in the battlefield, he needed clear and simple instructions. So therefore, Arjun asked Sri Krishna to reveal what was most appropriate for him at this point in time. Sri Krishna understood Arjun's situation and provided an answer in the next shlok. Lord Krishna says in 3.3, in this world, since time immemorial, I have created a twofold path, O sinless one. The yoga of knowledge for contemplative individuals and the yoga of action for yogis. To understand the shlok, let us consider our own example. Most of us are at a stage in our lives where we are active and want to make a contribution to the world. For such active individuals or yogis, Lord Krishna says the path of action is the most appropriate. Once we reach a stage where we exhaust all of our desires, we transcend the path of action to pursue the path of knowledge. But there are few rare individuals who are at an advanced stage of their spiritual journey, at a very young age. They do not have to take the traditional path of action before taking the path of knowledge. Since they have already eliminated most of their desires, they can directly pursue the path of knowledge. But for most of us, the path of action is the way to go. In 3.4, Krishna continues, one cannot achieve freedom from karmic reactions by merely abstaining from work, nor can one attain perfection of knowledge by mere physical renunciation. Lord Krishna explains to Arjun that freedom from karmic reactions cannot be attained by avoiding to start a new action or by giving up actions that have already begun. It would be similar to cutting off a plant without plucking its roots. Until our vasanas have been completely eradicated, we will keep generating desires which will lead us to selfish actions. But once vasanas have been eradicated, only selfless actions will remain. And so, the perfection of knowledge, which means siddhi, cannot be attained just by mere renunciation of the material things. Further, he says, for no one can stay without performing action, even for a moment. All beings helplessly are compelled to act by the gunas born of Prakriti. Now, in order to understand this verse, let us understand what is Prakriti. In simple terms, Prakriti is nature. And the tendency of nature, as we all know, is to act continuously. It never stays actionless, even for a moment. For instance, even a rock that seems actionless is undergoing geological changes that are visible only after thousands or millions of years. Shri Krishna informs us that all beings have no choice but to act. because all beings are made up of Prakriti. He explains that Prakriti gives rise to the three gunas, that is, energies or forces that make up this entire universe. These three energies are the Rajas, which causes movement, Tamas, which causes inertia, and Sattva, which maintains harmony between movement and inertia. This topic is taken up in great detail in later chapters. But for now, let us move to the next slok, where he says, "One who sits forcibly restraining his organs of action, yet keeps thinking about objects, that foolish individual is known as a hypocrite." So in this shloka, Sri Krishna issues a strong warning to anyone who thinks that they can advance on the spiritual path through extreme repression of the body or of the mind. He uses a strong term to admonish such individuals by calling them hypocrites. The previous shloka informed us that the body, mind, and intellect comprise of the three gunas. These gunas born of Prakriti will always compel us to perform actions. But the current shloka tells us that repression of action will not lead to elimination of desires. We have no choice but to perform action. Yet at the same time, we need to clear up our desires and vasanas. So what's the conclusion? We have to find a way to eliminate vasanas while we are performing actions. And that technique is nothing but Karma Yoga. In the following few verses, Lord Shri Krishna elaborates on explaining how one cannot avoid doing things, and so he explains how to do them without being attached to the material world. So in 2.7, Lord Krishna says, "But one who controls his senses by his mind, O Arjun, and performs Karma Yoga with his organs of action without attachment, that individual is superior." In this shlok, Shri Krishna says that we should not give up actions. Instead, we should give up attachment. Giving up attachment is a technique in itself. And this chapter goes into a lot of detail on that topic. To begin with, the shloka informs us that we need to arm ourselves with two weapons: discrimination, which is vivek, and dispassion or vairagya. Let's first look at discrimination or vivek. If we have followed the teaching so far, we know that material objects are temporary and they are not the true sources of happiness. But it is extremely easy to forget this teaching, especially if we have strong vasanas and desires. Therefore, we have to constantly arm ourselves with the weapon of discrimination by being always aware and alert about our thoughts and emotions. And we have to be especially alert when we are around objects that we are attached to. For a simple example, take food. It could be chocolates for a person having a sweet tooth. Next comes dispassion. If we constantly practice discrimination, dispassion will happen automatically. Objects, people, and situations will begin to lose their hold on us. Dispassion will prevent our energy from rushing out into the world of material objects through our senses. This is what the shloka means by the phrase, "One who controls his senses by his minds." Finally, once the mind has gained back control over the senses, then the energy that once rushed out through our senses can be channeled into performing Karma Yoga. The next shloka will go deeper into what Sri Krishna means by Karma Yoga. So in 2.8, he says, you should perform prescribed actions, since action is superior to inaction. Also, even the journey of the body cannot be accomplished through inaction. Now Lord Shri Krishna speaks about what kind of action should be performed. He urges Arjun to only perform niyatam, or prescribed actions. Actions can be one of the two main types, niyatam or prescribed actions, or nishiddha or forbidden actions. A few examples of the prescribed actions can be performing one's own swadharma, serving one's parents or family and nation. Forbidden actions are the actions that one must not perform. For example, say killing another being or stealing or cheating, stuff like that. So here Shri Krishna urges Arjun to perform prescribed actions, but without any trace of attachment to the action or to the fruit of the action. In addition, he also iterates the notion that one should never resort to inaction. He says that if one does not act, one cannot even perform maintenance of his own body. So further in 3.9 he says, other than those actions performed for the yajna, this world gets bound by action. Therefore, O Kaunteya, perform actions in that regard, without attachment. It is very imperative to highlight what Lord Krishna said in the above verse. He says, apart from when a person performs yajna, there is no act in this world to which a man does not get attached. Which means that during the time, people were selflessly involved in performing the yajna, unlike today. It is a shame that today we perform yajna only for our own gains attached to this material world. Further, in 3.10 he says, in ancient times, Prajapati created humanity along with yajna. He said, through this yajna, let everyone prosper, and may it become your fulfiller of wishes. Citing the example of Prajapati Daksh, Lord Krishna explains that yajna is embedded within the fabric of humanity since time immemorial. It is a universal law. Once invoked, that law provides us with all that we need in this world. It becomes the fulfiller of wishes. And the key to invoke that universal law is to perform selfless action dedicated to a higher ideal. A common question for many of us is, I understand the concept of selfless dedication. However, how do I know that I will be able to fulfill my material needs if I give up caring for the fruits of action altogether? To this, Lord Krishna says, perform actions with selfless dedication or yajna, and your material needs will automatically be provided for. And this is the essence of Karma Yoga. And 3.11 he further says, you will make the deities prosper through this yajna, and the deities will make you prosper. By mutually making each other prosperous, you will attain the highest good. In 3.12, he continues, the deities nourished by yajna will also provide you the objects you desire. One who consumes these objects without offering them to others, he is a thief. Those wise individuals who consume the remnants of yajna, they are liberated from all sins. But those sinful ones who cook only for themselves, they consume only sin. In 3.14 he continues, from food are all beings created. From rain, food is created. Yajna gives birth to rain, and rain is born out of karma. Lord Krishna illustrates how yajna is embedded within the fabric of the entire universe. If we interpret this shloka literally, it refers to Vedic rituals that were used to invoke the rain gods. But if we want to go deeper, we have to interpret the shloka symbolically. So the message here is that if people come together selflessly to work towards a higher ideal, it is a guarantee that their efforts will be successful. In 3.15 he says, know that actions arise out of the Vedas, and that the Vedas arise out of the imperishable, which is the eternal essence. Therefore, yajna is always established in that all-pervading eternal essence. Lord Shri Krishna reveals the connection between yajna and the eternal essence in this shlok. Here he says that yajna is an integral part of the eternal essence because it is born out of the Vedas. Symbolically, the Vedas represent the rule book of the universe, and so yajna becomes an essential law embedded in the universe. So in summary, the teaching of Karma Yoga so far is this. Actions are of two types, selfless and selfish. Selfish actions binds us to worldly objects, and selfless actions do not bind us. Therefore, we must move gradually from the level of inaction to selfish action first, and then from selfish action to selfless action, or yajna. Only through acting in the spirit of yajna, we will move forward on the path to realizing the eternal essence. Further in 3.16, he continues, in this manner, one who does not follow this system of evolution, that malicious individual who dwells in sense pleasures, wastes his life. In this shlok, Shri Krishna says that yajna is a system of evolution, which means it is a method to move from a lower plane of existence to a higher plane of existence. Considering the fact that humans, being the only species capable of rational analysis and thinking, have a choice. that is, to remain at the current state and given into their lower nature, or to evolve into a higher state of existence. Now, what is lower nature? When one continues to harbor selfish desires and lives for the sake of sense pleasure, that person generates guilt, fear, or anger, hatred, pride, and other such emotions that strengthen the ego. Such an individual is termed malicious by Lord Krishna. That individual is said to have lived in vain because he did not use the wonderful opportunity of being born as a human to access higher nature. So then, who is the individual of higher nature? It is the individual who has begun identifying with a higher ideal. And in doing so, he has slowly eroded his ego in the selfless service of that higher ideal. Karma Yoga is the first step to participate in the system of evolution. In the upcoming shlokas, he again emphasizes what has already been established, citing different examples. In 3.19 and 3.20, what he says is quite self-explanatory. We'll just read them. In 3.19, he says, "Always perform prescribed actions diligently without attachment, for by performing action without attachment, an individual attains the supreme." And in 3.20, he says, "Only through action did many kings like Janak attain perfection. So even from the viewpoint of societal welfare, you must perform action." In 3.21, he says, "Whatever an ideal person does, so do the other people, which is imitate him. Whatever standard he sets, other people follow." So in addition to urging us and Arjun to perform Karma Yoga, Lord Krishna also reveals an important leadership lesson here. The best way to lead is to lead by setting an example and not by making flowery speeches or hiring motivational speakers. This point is echoed in the management texts of today. Further, Lord continues in 3.22 and he says, "Neither do I have the least bit of duty in the three worlds, O Parth, nor is there anything for me to gain or lose through action. Yet I engage in action." And in 3.23 he says, "For if I were not to perform my duties alertly, people from everywhere will follow my path, O Parth." In 3.22 he explains, or he emphasizes, that he has attained the highest form, but he still engages in performing action to benefit the masses. Also he does that to set an example, as he already established in verse 3.21, that people imitate the actions of an ideal person, hence the verse 3.23. Further in 3.24 he elaborates on what would happen to mortal humans if he did not indulge in Karma Yoga. He says, "These people would be ruined if I stopped performing action. I would become the creator of confusion and destroy these beings." The next shlokas are again just a repetition of previous shloka to create more emphasis by giving a third-person perspective, and we'll just read them for you. 3.25 says, "Just as an ignorant individual performs action with attachment, O Bharat, so does a wise person perform action without attachment, wishing for the welfare of the society." 3.26 says, "No wise individual should create confusion in the minds of ignorant people who are attached to action. He should engage them in all actions, himself performing them diligently." Finally, he comes back to the topic of gunas in 3.27 and he says, "All actions in all situations are performed by the gunas of Prakriti. He who is completely deluded by the ego thinks, 'I am the doer.'" We saw earlier that an ignorant person is attached to action while a wise person is not attached to it. But what exactly does it mean to be attached to action? Lord Krishna clarifies that point in this shlok, which is yet another deep shlok with layers and layers of meaning. So let us understand this step by step. First, let us take the example of someone who has accomplished a great thing. For instance, someone who has won a Grammy Award for an outstanding singing performance. If that singer truly examines her accomplishment, she will realize that there were so many people and situations that were responsible for her accomplishment. To begin with, her parents probably encouraged her to pursue music seriously. Her music teacher taught her the theoretical aspects of music. She met other musicians who helped her. She came across a situation that inspired her to write her award-winning song. Her accomplishment was a product of all these factors. Now compare this singer to some other award-winning singer who thinks that it was she who did it all and does not even acknowledge the contribution of others. The notion that I am the doer is called ahankar, or the ego. Someone who is under the influence of the ego has been called deluded in this shlok. Let us now look at what it means by gunas and prakriti. For instance, just like our scientists have discovered that all of the matter is made up of fundamental particles known as atoms, ancient rishis postulated that all matter, or prakriti, is made up of combinations of three essential forces: the inert force, the active force, and the harmonizing force. These three forces, or gunas, are the tamogun, the rajogun, and the sattvagun respectively. According to Krishna, every action that we perform is in reality performed by prakriti that comprises the gunas. So then who are we? We go back to the second chapter to remember that we are the eternal essence that is everlasting and all-pervading. Like the sun that exists around the earth but does not itself do anything, the eternal essence does not perform any action. It only exists along with the prakriti which is performing the action. Most of us that do not realize this, unfortunately, fall in the ignorant category. So in 3.28 he says, "But he who knows the truth, O mighty armed, about the division of gunas as well as their functions, recognizes the interplay of gunas. Having known this, he does not get attached." The truth, as we saw earlier, is that all actions in this world are performed by prakriti, and prakriti comprises three gunas and their respective functions, termed in this shloka as guna karma vibhag. So therefore, if one knows that he is not the doer and that things are happening on their own accord, he does not get attached to anything in this world. He becomes just a witness or a sakshi, just like someone watching a play does not get attached to one actor or another. Another example is the process of digestion. We are not attached to it because we know that we are not the doer in that process. It is the nature or prakriti that does the process of digestion. This teaching is beneficial in our day-to-day lives as well. If we contemplate on this teaching, it has the effect of thinning our ego. Once that happens, it makes us very humble and reduces several negative emotions like fear or anger or stress. So further in 3.30, Lord Krishna says, "Dedicate all your actions to me, using your intellect, without expectation or sense of minus, fighting without mental distress." Lord Krishna provides the essence of the entire chapter in this shlok, and so it is one of the most important shlokas in this chapter. It can be considered karma yoga in a nutshell. In this shlok, he covers three major topics. The first one is, what should be our attitude while performing actions? The second being, what kinds of actions should we perform? And the third one is, how do we make our actions more efficient? Firstly, he talks about the attitude that one should maintain while performing actions. He says that before, during, and after the action, one should continuously dedicate the action to a higher ideal. It can be any higher ideal, like our family or employer or nation, but we should consider it pure and divine, indicated by the word me in the shlok. Secondly, he asks us to use our intellect to guide us so that only correct actions, that is, our duties, are performed by us. Actions that are unethical or illegal should be discarded by the intellect. He urges us to strengthen and reinforce the intellect's power of discrimination, called as vivek. A true karma yogi always lives in the present moment and gives complete and undivided attention to the task at hand, no matter what kind of task it is. Lord Krishna urges us to give up expectations for the future, nirasha, anxiety over the past, which is nirmama, and overexcitement in the present, that is vigat jwara. He makes a declaration in verse 3.31 and 3.32, which is self-explanatory, and it translates to, "Those who always execute these teachings of mine with faith and without objection, they are freed from all actions. But those who find faults with my teachings, being bereft of knowledge and devoid of discrimination, they disregard these principles and ruin themselves." Again, reiterating the teachings he already established in this chapter, he says in 3.33, "Even wise people act according to their natures, for all living beings are propelled by their natural tendencies. What will one gain by repression?" Krishna says that mere restraint of actions will not result in eradication of desires, since the vasanas will continue to generate more and more thoughts. And direct suppression of thoughts is next to impossible. Many people try to repress thoughts and desires in the hope of progressing spiritually, but like a spring that is pushed down, that strategy backfires very easily. In 334 he says, "The senses naturally experience attachment and aversion to the sense objects, but do not be controlled by them, for they are like robbers and foes." Lord Krishna compares likes and dislikes to robbers who target travelers that are unprepared and not alert. The robbers will come out of nowhere and distract travelers from their path. Similarly, the likes makes us run towards them and dislikes makes run away from them. But ultimately, both take us away from our path. By being constantly alert that likes and dislikes can arise, we can reduce their influence. In 35, Lord Krishna says, "It is far better to perform one's natural prescribed duty, though tinged with faults, than to perform another's prescribed duty, though perfectly. In fact, it is preferable to die in the discharge of one's own duty than to follow the path of another, which is fraught with danger." Here, Lord Krishna says that once we have selected a strong desire as our swadharma, which is prescribed duty, we should not let weaker likes or dislikes distract us. For example, let's say we are pursuing a PhD in science. We may come across someone following a different profession who earns significantly more than what we are earning. We should not cause our liking for more money to change our path. Sticking to our swadharma will not only help us reach our spiritual goal, it will also let us have peace of mind. Further, in 336, Arjun asks, "Why is a person impelled to commit sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if he is forced to do it, O descendant of Vrishni?" To this, Lord Krishna replies in 337, and he says, "It is desire, it is anger, born of rajas. It is voracious eater. Know it to be the sinful, all-devouring enemy here in this world. The tendency to recreate happiness through acquisition of an object is desire. To do it repeatedly is called greed. The ego becomes strong through the increase in rajas, and it begins to go outward, comparing us with others. If someone has less than us, our pride inflates. Conversely, if someone has more than us, jealousy is created. The practical lesson here is that we should not encourage our likes and dislikes. In other words, if a like or dislike arises in the mind, we should not give it too much attention. If we do, it will get stronger. It is easier to control a like or a dislike. Once it has grown into a strong desire or hatred, then it becomes much difficult to control. And once it has taken a stronger form, then to fulfill the desire, the person is compelled to do anything as if it were forceful, even after knowing that it is a sin. Now, a very apt example is drugs. It is comparatively easy to stay away from a drug than to get rid of it once one has become addicted to it. A drug addict does anything and everything he can to get his dose of the drug, even after knowing that it is a sinful act. Drawing multiple analogies to make it clearer, Krishna further says in 3.38, just as smoke covers fire, dirt covers a mirror, and a womb covers a fetus, so does this desire cover wisdom. In 39, he says this wisdom of even intelligent people is covered by that eternal enemy in the form of desire, which is like an insatiable fire. Lord Krishna uses two metaphors to describe desire in the shlok. First, he calls desire an eternal enemy. We may think that we have subdued desire, but its seed lies waiting in the form of likes and dislikes. When we least expect it, it will arise and turn into a strong desire within milliseconds. Hence, by calling it an eternal enemy, Lord Krishna urges us to be eternally alert and vigilant in regards to our desires. The metaphor used for desire is that of a fire. Fire never says no to any fuel that is added to it. It is capable of surviving indefinitely as long as the fuel is provided. But conversely, it ends the minute it runs out of fuel. Therefore, Shri Krishna urges us to take our focuses away from thoughts of like and dislike as soon as we are aware of them. It is the power behind thought that fuels likes and dislikes. So, having convinced Arjun that desire and anger lie within him and not in someone else, Lord Krishna proceeds to reveal their location to Arjun in the next slok. He purposely uses the language of war so that Arjun will respond with rapt attention. So in 340, Lord Krishna says, the senses, mind and intellect are said to be its residence. Through them, this desire covers the body dweller's wisdom. And in 41, Lord Krishna says, therefore first control the senses, O excellent among Bharats, and with force, definitely kill this destroyer of knowledge and wisdom. Having revealed the location of desire, Shri Krishna now provides a method of taming desire. He advises Arjun to first control desire at the level of the senses. Desire originates in the likes and dislikes present in the senses, and therefore that is where we should go after them. This requires us to be constantly aware and alert for our likes and dislikes, and not to get overpowered by them once we see them arise. For example, we can detect anger towards someone we dislike arise in our mind. We may try to suppress angry thoughts, but that is not feasible. So we should first learn to control anger at the level of our mind by not letting out any harsh words towards that person. How do we remain alert? There are several techniques to make us stay alert and bring us to the present moment. The simplest technique is to take a few breaths and just focus attention on the inhalation and exhalation. This will immediately stop all the mental stress or all the mental mess. Shri Krishna also mentions here that desire not only destroys knowledge but also wisdom. So let us understand what is meant by wisdom here. And essentially, knowledge combined with experience is wisdom. When we memorize something from a book, we gain knowledge. But when we experience something on our own and relate it with the knowledge that we've gained and learn out of that experience, it becomes our wisdom. With this shlok, Shri Krishna answered the question raised by Arjun, which was in regards to obstacles to Karma Yoga. He also provided a simple technique that only begins to address the obstacles, but does not completely eradicate them. In the next two verses, he concludes the topic of Karma Yoga by providing the advanced technique of removing these obstacles. So in 3.42, he says, it is said that the senses are superior than the body, the mind is superior than the senses, the intellect are superior than the mind, and that the eternal essence is superior than the intellect. Lord Krishna delivers yet another profound shlok here that has layers and layers of meaning. Let us examine its practical aspects here. This shlok provides us a hierarchy of our nature or our prakriti. In the second chapter, Lord Krishna provided us with the ultimate goal of the Gita, which is to realize that we are the eternal essence and are distinct from our prakriti, which comprises the body, mind and intellect. So in this shlok, he further informs us that these three components of our prakriti are not equally powerful. There is a hierarchy or an order to their power. The subtler a component is, the more power it has. The body is the most tangible or the most gross aspect of prakriti. Subtler than the body are the senses. Subtler than the senses is the mind, which generates reactions in the form of emotions and thoughts, but lacks decision-making power. Subtler than the mind is the intellect, which can analyze and understand the thoughts generated by the mind, and has the power to control the mind, the senses, and the body. And here is the key point. If we assert control of one aspect of prakriti, we automatically bring all the lower levels in our command. Just for instance, let's say someone wants to quit smoking. If he convinces his intellect that smoking is harmful and also remains alert at the time a desire to smoke arises, he has a good chance of quitting smoking. But if the intellect starts rationalizing his behavior by saying, one cigarette is not a problem, then there is no chance. Now, if we are operating on the level of our vasanas, the intellect is where the hierarchy would stop. Then desires would take hold of the senses, the mind, and the intellect, making us act selfishly. There would be no way out, but this shlok urges us to realize that there is something even superior to the intellect, which has the potential to root our desires that have penetrated the intellect. So in the initial stages of our journey, that something is a higher ideal. But as we proceed in our journey, it is the highest possible ideal, which is the eternal essence itself. Unless we recognize this, we will be stuck at the level of the intellect. This paves the way for the technique of removing obstacles, which is covered in the next and final shloka of the third chapter. So 3.43 reads, in this way, having known the eternal essence to be superior than the intellect, and having strengthened oneself by oneself, O mighty armed, slay the insurmountable enemy in the form of desire. One of the major points made in this shlok is that we have to tackle our problems from the standpoint of eternal essence, not from the standpoint of our prakriti, which is not our real identity. We have been conditioned to identify with our prakriti since our birth, and that is what makes it difficult. Therefore, to the maximum extent possible, we should always try to identify with the eternal essence. For instance, we come across a thought that says, I can smoke one cigarette today. It will cause me no harm. We have to be alert and ask ourselves, who is this that has generated this thought? If we are truly identified with the eternal essence, we will recognize that our prakriti, our inbuilt tendency, is saying this. This is not easy to do. Typically, when such a thought arises, it short-circuits our intellect and turns into action immediately. That is why Lord Krishna urges us to start on the path of Karma Yoga, so that we slowly lose attachment with material objects first, then with our body, followed by our mind, and then the intellect. This inner conflict between our lower nature and our higher nature is the central theme of the Gita. Therefore, Sri Krishna concludes the chapter on Karma Yoga with a profound message. He says, strengthen yourself by yourself. It means that by practicing Karma Yoga, we strengthen our higher nature, and that enables us to control our lower nature. So in summary, Lord Krishna provides the technique of Karma Yoga in chapter 3, which is the first step that all of us have to take in order to begin the process of elimination of vasanas. First, he stressed the need to convince ourselves that we have to act. We simply cannot think that we can eliminate vasanas by not acting. Once we have convinced ourselves that we have to act, we have to adopt the attitude of Karma Yoga so that further actions do not cause bondage. The attitude of Karma Yoga comprises 5 aspects of knowledge or buddhi that we need to maintain while performing any action. And what are these 5 aspects? The first one is samatva buddhi. We need to remain calm but alert in all situations. As the earlier chapter explained, situations are transient. They come and they go. Having understood that they are transient, we should not get overly excited or agitated with each new situation. Second is swadharma buddhi. We should conduct self-analysis to understand where our strongest desire lies, and then deploy those desires in the service of a higher ideal. The third one is samarpan buddhi. We should always dedicate all our actions to something that is higher than us. We should remember that the entire universe is operating in the spirit of yajna. Whatever we own that is material is in the service of the yajna and is not ours. The fourth one is the asanga buddhi. We should constantly assess whether we are attached to any material object, person, emotion, position, or action. In other words, we should analyze our relationship with those things to understand whether we give so much importance to a thing that we cannot do without it. We should also remember that everything is the gunas acting on the gunas. Therefore, we should work with no expectation of the future and no burden of the past. And finally, the fifth one is prasad buddhi. While we perform actions, we should not keep an eye on the result. We should accept every result as a prasad. If we get attached to one type of result, whether it be positive or negative, the opposite or the complement of that result will torture us and bind us. Hit the like button if you've liked the explanation. Also share it with your friends and family and subscribe to OM Dharma for upcoming chapters.